Okay, so we just saw how easy it is to use mixins. But how is a component object actually merged together with the mixin? Which options take precedence in case there are conflicts? That's what we'll be looking at in this lecture. When both a mixin and a component contains the same option, Vue will merge them together using one of its merge strategies depending on the particular option being merged. Let's take a moment to see what happens when both a mixin and a component has a lifecycle hook. Since we already have the created lifecycle hook within the mixin, I just want to add an alert to it so that we can see what happens when we run the code. So I'll add the alert here, saying retrieving products. And then I will just add the created lifecycle hook within the list products component and see what happens. So let's open that up. And like I said, create the created lifecycle hook with an alert. List products created. So let's run the code and see which and how many alerts are displayed. As you can see, both of the lifecycle hooks are invoked, so any hooks in mixins and the component itself are actually merged together. We previously took a look at lifecycle hooks in details where we saw that a given lifecycle hook is stored within an array, meaning that multiple functions can be attached to the same lifecycle hook. This is actually how Vue handles this. It just places both of the hooks within the same array and invokes all of the array's functions as it normally would. Let's refresh the page again. Notice how the mixins lifecycle hook is invoked first. This is simply because Vue's merge strategy places the mixins lifecycle hooks at the beginning of the array, followed by those of the component. This would also be the case if you added multiple functions for a given lifecycle hook within an array. Before moving on, I'll just go ahead and comment out the alerts so that we won't have to deal with them every time we make a change to the code. Okay, so what about the other options, such as methods or computer properties? Well, let's test it out by adding a method to simulate adding a product to the cart. So I'll go to the list products component, and I'll start out by going to the template, because here I want to add a link that we can click to add a product to the cart. So I'll add an anchor tag here with a click event handler and the prevent modifier. And this click event will simply invoke an add to cart method and pass in the product, and we'll implement this method in just a moment. And the text will just be add to cart. And now I'll go to the mixin, because this is where I want to add this method. So let's add it within the methods object here. Add to cart and the product as a parameter. And the implementation is just going to open an alert dialog for now. So adding, and then the product name, product.name to cart, and I'll just add mixin in parentheses so we can see where the alert is coming from. And opening a browser now, we should see the alert being displayed when clicking a link to add a product to the cart. And indeed we do. But what would happen if we added a method with the same signature within the component itself? Well, let's try. So back to the list products component. So I'll just add the methods object, and I can go back to the mixin, make a copy of the method, paste it in, and just replace the mixin with components. Back to the browser, let's try to click a link. And clicking a link now will only show the alert from the component itself and not the mixin. So as we can see, in cases where options conflict, the component's option takes precedence and the mixin option is overridden. The exception to this is of course lifecycle hooks, as we saw a minute ago. One last thing I want to mention is that each time a mixin is used, a fresh object is passed to the component. This means that changing a mixin's data property in one component will not change the data in another component, so the data is isolated to each component, you could say. We can easily verify this by using the add-to-cart method to change the name of the product just for testing purposes. So all I have to do to test it is within the list products component, within this add-to-cart method, just set the name of the product to test. And then to make sure the components are not destroyed when switching between them, we need to wrap the component with the keep alive tag, as we have seen earlier in the course. And that has to be done within the app.vue file. So, adding the keep alive tag right here within the template and move the component tag within it. And let's test the changes by clicking to add a product to the cart. Now we see that the product name has changed on the page, but if I change to the sitemap view, notice how the product name has not changed here. This is because the sitemap component does not reference the same product, rather it has its own copy of the product. This means that when using a mixin with multiple components, the components will still be self-contained and they will not interfere with each other. That was a quick look at how Vue merges mixins and component options. The key takeaways from this lecture is that for lifecycle hooks, all hooks are merged together and the mixin hooks are invoked before those of the component. For other options, the component's option takes precedence and any conflicting option within a mixin is simply overridden and will therefore not be part of the merged options object. Lastly, each component receives a unique copy of the mixin, meaning that any changes made within one component does not affect other components using the same mixin.